The funeral flowers were still fresh when I realized my stepsons wanted me gone. I stood alone at the back of the chapel watching mourners file past Robert's casket. 19 years of marriage, and here I was at 63 feeling like an outsider at my own husband's funeral. The Sacramento summer heat made the air conditioning work overtime, but I felt cold down to my bones. Brandon arrived late. 45 years old, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost $3,000, he walked down the center aisle like he owned the place. His brother Tyler followed close behind 42, softer around the edges, but with the same calculating eyes. They didn't look at me. Not once. I'd known them since they were in their 20s, fresh out of college and full of their father's ambition. Robert had tried so hard to build a relationship between us. Family dinners every Sunday, vacations to Lake Tahoe, Christmas mornings unwrapping gifts in our living room. But there was always the distance, a wall I could never quite break through. "They just need time," Robert used to say, his hand warm in mine. "They'll come around, Em. I promise." He'd been wrong. During the service, Brandon gave the eulogy. He spoke about his father's business success, his dedication to family, his legacy. He mentioned Robert's first wife, their mother, who'd passed away from cancer 23 years ago. He talked about growing up in Sacramento, learning to fish at Lake Tahoe, following in their father's footsteps. He never mentioned me. Not once in 15 minutes. The congregation shifted uncomfortably. A few people glanced my way. My friend Margaret, sitting 3 rows back, looked outraged. But I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap, and let Brandon erase me from Robert's story. After the service came the reception at our house, my house, the one Robert and I had shared on Elm Street in East Sacramento. The Victorian home with the wraparound porch and the garden we'd planted together. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, recently appraised at $890,000. Not that I was thinking about money. Not then. I moved through the crowd like a ghost. People offered condolences, squeezed my hand, promised to call. But mostly they talked to Brandon and Tyler, who stood near the fireplace accepting sympathies like they were the ones who'd lost a spouse. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, from down the street, pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Emily, are you eating? You look so thin." I hadn't been able to keep food down for weeks. Not since those final days in the hospital watching Robert slip away from me one breath at a time. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired. Those boys of his," she lowered her voice. "They haven't been very attentive, have they?" That was putting it mildly. During the 3 months of Robert's illness, pancreatic cancer stage 3 merciless, I'd been alone. Brandon had visited twice. Tyler came once, stayed 45 minutes, spent most of it on his phone. I was the one holding Robert's hand through the chemotherapy. I was the one making decisions about pain management when the treatment stopped working. I was the one there at 3 in the morning when he whispered my name in his sleep. "They're grieving in their own way," I said, because what else could I say? Mrs. Chen looked like she wanted to argue, but just then Brandon's wife Olivia appeared in the doorway. 38 years old, blonde highlights perfect, even in mourning designer black dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "Emily," her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Brandon and Tyler would like to speak with you, in Robert's office." Not Dad's office, Robert's office, like he was already a stranger. "Now," I asked, "if it's not too much trouble." It was trouble. The house was full of people. Robert's business partners were in the living room. His golf buddies clustered on the porch. But Olivia stood there with that patient, expectant look, and I found myself following her down the hallway. Robert's office smelled like him leather-old books and the sandalwood cologne I'd given him for our anniversary. His reading glasses sat on the desk next to a half-finished crossword puzzle. I'd meant to throw away that newspaper. Somehow I couldn't. Brandon stood behind Robert's desk, Tyler beside him. They'd positioned themselves like executives at a board meeting. I took the chair across from them, the visitor's chair in my own husband's office. "Emily," Brandon began, "we appreciate you hosting everyone today." Hosting. In my own home. "We know this is difficult," Tyler added. His voice had that same false sympathy I'd heard at the hospital. Losing Dad so suddenly. Suddenly Robert had been sick for 3 months. Where had they been? "We need to discuss some practical matters," Brandon continued. He pulled a leather folder from his briefcase. The same briefcase Robert had given him for his law school graduation. "Dad's estate. His assets. We need to understand how everything will be distributed." My throat felt tight. Robert and I discussed this. He assured me everything was taken care of. Yes. Brandon opened the folder with careful precision. Dad did make provisions, but the situation is somewhat complicated. Tyler shifted his weight. He always did that when he was uncomfortable. Dad's will is very specific about how his assets should be distributed. The house here in Sacramento, Brandon said, running his finger down a document, appraised at $890,000, goes to Tyler and myself jointly. The room tilted slightly. I'm sorry, what the vacation property at Lake Tahoe, $780,000, also goes to us. I gripped the arms of the chair. The leather was worn smooth, Robert's hands in this same position thousands of times over the years. That can't be right. Robert promised the business assets and investments. Brandon continued, not looking up. Approximately $450,000, to be distributed between Tyler and myself. Each number hit me like a physical blow. Our home. The place where Robert proposed to me on one knee in the garden. The Lake Tahoe cabin where we'd spent our honeymoon. Where we'd celebrated 10 anniversaries. Where Robert told me he loved me for the first time. All of it gone. What about me? I asked quietly. Tyler cleared his throat. There's the life insurance policy. $200,000. That should be more than adequate for your needs going forward. $200,000. For a 63-year-old woman who'd given up her teaching career to care for her husband. Who'd spent the last 19 years managing Robert's household, entertaining his business associates, supporting his every decision. $200,000 to start over. I don't understand, I said. Robert told me I'd be taken care of. He promised I'd never have to worry. You won't have to worry. Brandon's voice was patient, like he was explaining something to a child. $200,000 is a substantial sum. Invested properly, it could provide a comfortable income for years. But the house, naturally you can't stay here. Tyler again, that false gentleness making my skin crawl. But we're not heartless. We'll give you... What do you think, Brandon? 30 days, 21 days seems more reasonable, Brandon said. That's 3 weeks to make arrangements. Plenty of time. 21 days. 3 weeks to pack up 19 years of my life and find somewhere else to live. I looked around the office. The bookshelf where Robert kept his first edition Hemingways. The window overlooking the garden. The photograph on his desk, not of Brandon or Tyler, but of us on our wedding day. Both of us laughing at something the photographer had said. There's one more thing. Brandon pulled out another document. Dad accumulated some significant medical bills during his final illness. The insurance covered most of it, but there's still approximately $165,000 outstanding. The walls seemed to press inward. $165,000. Since you were his wife and made the medical decisions, the hospital is looking to you for payment. Brandon's voice was clinical, now all business. It's unfortunate, but that's how these things work legally. I did the math in my head. $200,000 from insurance minus $165,000 in debt. That left me $35,000. $35,000 to rebuild my entire life at 63. But surely I started the estate assets. The estate assets are tied up in probate, Tyler interrupted. And given the specific terms of the will, those debts are considered separate from the inherited properties. It's complicated, Brandon added, but our attorney has reviewed everything. This is how it has to be. Their attorney. Not our attorney. Not Robert's attorney. Theirs. I sat there surrounded by the ghosts of my life with Robert and tried to process what they were telling me. The house would go to them. The Tahoe cabin would go to them. The business assets would go to them. I would get the debts and just enough money to survive, if I was lucky. I need time to think about this, I said finally. Of course. Brandon closed the folder and stood up. But the 21-day clock starts tomorrow. We'll need your answer by then about when you'll be moving out. They left me alone in Robert's office. I could hear the murmur of voices from the reception, the clink of glasses, the low hum of conversation. All those people out there eating the food I'd ordered, drinking the wine I'd chosen, offering sympathy for a loss they couldn't begin to understand. I sat in the gathering darkness and tried to remember how to breathe. That's when I noticed the envelope. It was tucked into the desk drawer, the one Robert always kept locked. But the drawer was open now, just a crack. Inside I could see a manila envelope with my name written on it in Robert's handwriting. For Emily. Open when they show you the will. My hands shook as I reached for it. The next morning, I sat in David Morrison's law office on the 15th floor of the Wells Fargo building downtown. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Sacramento River glittered in the sunlight. Normal people were living normal lives down there. Going to work, meeting for coffee, making plans that didn't involve lawyers and wills and the systematic dismantling of everything they'd built. I envied them. Morrison had been Robert's attorney for 12 years. I'd met him at company parties, shaken his hand at charity events. He had a firm handshake and kind eyes and photographs of his grandchildren on his desk. I'd trusted him. But when I walked into his office that morning, something felt wrong. Brandon and Tyler were already there. They sat on one side of the conference table like they'd been there for hours. Brandon in his crisp navy suit, Tyler in gray. Both of them had coffee. Nobody had offered me any. "Emily." Morrison stood up, but his usual warmth was missing. "Thank you for coming. Please sit down." I took the chair across from my stepson's. The leather was cold through my dress. I'd worn black again, the same dress from the funeral. It felt appropriate somehow. "I want to start by saying how sorry I am for your loss," Morrison began. "Robert was a good man and a valued client." "Thank you," I managed. "We're here today to review the terms of his will and begin the probate process." He opened a file folder. "I've prepared copies for everyone." He slid a document across the table to me. 23 pages dense legal language, Robert's signature at the bottom. Dated 2 years ago, just after our 17th anniversary. "The will is fairly straightforward," Morrison continued. "Robert made very specific provisions for the distribution of his assets." Brandon leaned forward slightly, eager. "The primary residence at 2847 Elm Street, Sacramento." Morrison read from the document. "Valued at approximately $890,000. To be transferred jointly to Brandon James Richardson and Tyler Michael Richardson." There it was, in black and white, legal and binding. "The vacation property at 428 Lakeshore Drive, Tahoe Vista, valued at approximately $780,000. Also to Brandon and Tyler jointly." I forced myself to keep breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth, like the grief counselor had taught me. "Business assets including stock in Richardson Consulting Group and various investment accounts totaling approximately $450,000, to be divided equally between Brandon and Tyler." Morrison kept reading. Each item, each asset, each piece of the life Robert and I had built together, all of it going to his sons. The furniture, the art collection, even Robert's car, the Mercedes he'd been so proud of. "And for Emily Richardson," Morrison said, his voice softening slightly. "The life insurance policy through Pacific Life in the amount of $200,000. $200,000, while they got $2.1 million. That's it. The words came out before I could stop them. Morrison looked uncomfortable. "There are also some personal items specifically designated for you. Jewelry, photographs, things of that nature. The full list is in Appendix C." I didn't look at Appendix C. I was staring at the signature at the bottom of the will. Robert's signature. The same confident scrawl I'd seen on birthday cards and love notes and the mortgage papers when we bought the house together. Had he really left me with almost nothing? Now regarding the medical expenses. Morrison pulled out another document. "There are outstanding bills totaling $165,347. Hospital care, oncology treatments, hospice services." "I know what they're for," I said quietly. "As Robert's spouse and the person who made medical decisions during his final illness, you are legally responsible for these debts." Morrison's voice was gentle but firm. "The estate assets cannot be distributed until probate is complete, which typically takes several months. These creditors cannot wait that long." Tyler spoke up. "We've already been contacted by the hospital. They're threatening to send the account to collections if payment isn't arranged soon." "So I pay them." My voice sounded far away. "From the life insurance." "That would be the most straightforward solution," Morrison agreed. I did the math again. 200,000 minus 165,000. $35,000 left. At 63, with no job, no home, and $35,000 to my name. "There's also the matter of the residence," Brandon said. His voice was measured professional. "Tyler and I will need to take possession of the Elm Street property fairly soon. We're prepared to give you 30 days to make arrangements." 30 days. Not 21 after all. How generous. I need to speak with my own attorney, I said. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Emily, Morrison said carefully, I can assure you that everything in this will is legal and properly executed. Seeking additional counsel would only delay the inevitable and cost you money you'll need for other things. Nevertheless, Mother, Brandon's use of that word now after calling me Emily at the funeral felt like a slap. We understand you're emotional, but fighting this would be expensive and ultimately pointless. Dad was very clear about his wishes. We're trying to make this easy for you, Tyler added. We could demand you leave immediately, but we're giving you time. We could insist you pay the medical bills before we even discuss the house, but we're being flexible, making it easy. I looked at their faces. Robert's face split into two versions of the son he'd raised and saw nothing of the man I'd loved. I found something in Robert's desk, I said. An envelope with my name on it. Brandon's expression didn't change, but Tyler shifted in his seat. What kind of envelope? It had a key inside. No note, just a key. A key to what? Brandon asked. I don't know yet. I met his eyes. Do you? Dad kept a lot of keys. The Tahoe house, the shed, his file cabinets. Brandon's voice was casual, but his knuckles were white where he gripped his pen. It's probably nothing important. Probably, I agreed. But something in the way they looked at each other, a quick glance there and gone, told me it wasn't nothing. Morrison cleared his throat. Emily, I strongly recommend that you sign the preliminary documents today. They simply acknowledge that you've received a copy of the will and understand its contents. It doesn't waive any of your rights. He slid another paper across the table. Legal boilerplate dense paragraphs aligned for my signature at the bottom. I need time to review this, I said. Of course, take a few minutes. Morrison stood up. Brandon, Tyler, why don't we give Emily some privacy? We can get coffee downstairs. They filed out of the conference room. I watched them go. Morrison with his expensive suit and guilty conscience. Brandon with his confident stride. Tyler trailing behind like always. When the door closed, I was alone with 23 pages of legalese that were supposed to represent my entire future. I pulled out my phone and called the number I'd found in the envelope from Robert's desk, the one written on a small white card beneath the key. Mitchell & Associates, Private Investigations. A man answered on the second ring. Mitchell, my name is Emily Richardson. I think my husband hired you. There was a pause. Mrs. Richardson, I was hoping you'd call. Did you find the key? Yes, but I don't know what it opens. Box 427 at First National Bank on J Street. Your husband opened it 4 months ago. You're the only other person with access. 4 months ago, right when Robert's doctors had told us the cancer was terminal. What's in it? I asked. Evidence, Mrs. Richardson. Evidence that's going to change everything. First National Bank sat on the corner of J Street and 12th, a granite building that had survived the 1906 earthquake and looked like it could survive anything. I stood on the sidewalk outside the small brass key clutched in my hand and tried to decide if I was ready for whatever Robert had left me. The morning sun was already hot. Sacramento in July was unforgiving. I'd worn my lightest dress, pale blue cotton, the one Robert always said brought out my eyes. Stupid thing to think about now, but grief made you notice strange details. Inside the bank was all marble floors and hushed voices. I approached the desk where a nameplate read, Patricia Coleman, Branch Manager. I need to access a safety deposit box, I said. Box 427. Patricia was in her 50s with kind eyes and silver hair cut in a practical bob. She looked up from her computer and her expression shifted recognition, then sympathy. Mrs. Richardson, I was so sorry to hear about Robert. He was a wonderful man. Everyone kept saying that. Robert was wonderful. Robert was good. Robert was valued. As if past tense could somehow make his absence more bearable. Thank you, I managed. Did you know him well? He came in regularly over the years, always had time for a kind word. She stood up. I'll take you down to the vault. Do you have your key? I held it up. So small, this piece of brass. How could something so small hold so much weight? Patricia led me through a security door and down a marble staircase. The basement was cool and quiet, lined with metal boxes in various sizes. She used her master key and my key to open box 427. I'll give you some privacy, she said, gesturing to a small viewing room. Take all the time you need. The box was heavier than I expected. I carried it to the viewing room, a windowless space with a table, a chair, and nothing else. Private, secure, the kind of place where people kept their secrets. I sat down and lifted the metal lid. Inside were documents, lots of them, but not the dry legal papers I'd expected. These were personal, printed emails, financial statements, investigation reports, photographs, and on top of everything, a letter in Robert's handwriting. "My dearest M," it began. My eyes filled with tears immediately. I could hear his voice saying those words. "My dearest M." That's what he'd called me since our first date, when I'd told him my full name was Emily, but everyone called me M. "Everyone," he'd asked. "Well, my sister, and my dad before he passed." "Then I'll call you M too, if that's okay." It had been more than okay. It had been perfect. I wiped my eyes and kept reading. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone and the boys have shown their true colors. I'm so sorry you had to go through that, my love. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from it while I was alive, but I can protect you now." My hands were shaking. I set the letter down and reached for the first document in the box, a printed email exchange between Brandon and someone named Kevin Walsh. The timestamp showed it was from 7 months ago, right before Robert's diagnosis. "Kevin, Dad's getting worse. The doctors think he's got maybe 6 months, maybe less. We need to move faster on the transfer protocols. Can you expedite the paperwork we discussed?" The reply was equally chilling. "Brandon, I've prepared the documents as requested. Once your father signs, the business assets will be restructured under the new LLC. The personal properties can be transferred immediately upon death. What about the wife? Emily won't be a problem. She doesn't understand the business side. By the time she figures out what's happening, it'll be too late. Dad trusts us completely." I had to read it 3 times before the meaning sank in. They'd been planning this, planning to steal from their own father while he was dying. My stomach lurched. I thought I might be sick, but I forced myself to keep reading. The next document was a bank statement for an account I'd never heard of. Richardson Family Trust. The balance showed $4,700,000, $4.7 million. Below it was a handwritten note from Robert. "M, this is our real savings. The boys think all my money is tied up in the house and business, but I moved the bulk of our assets here months ago. I was trying to protect us. Protect you. The account is in your name only. Brandon and Tyler have no access." $4.7 million. We weren't struggling. We weren't even comfortable. Robert had been quietly wealthy, and his sons had been trying to steal from him anyway. I reached for the next folder with trembling hands. The tab read, "Private Investigation Report, Confidential." Inside were photographs. Brandon entering and leaving what looked like the Golden Gate Casino in Reno. The timestamp showed a multiple trips over the past 18 months, sometimes staying for several days. The financial records attached painted an even grimmer picture. Brandon owed $230,000 to various creditors, most of them connected to gambling debts. The next section was about Tyler, his consulting business that he was always talking about, the one that kept him so busy he couldn't visit his dying father. According to the investigation, it was actually a front for a series of failed investment schemes. He'd lost nearly $220,000 of other people's money, including funds that belonged to several elderly clients who'd trusted him with their retirement savings. Both of Robert's sons were drowning in debt. No wonder they were so eager to get their hands on their inheritance. But the most devastating document came next. A medical report dated 3 months before Robert's death from a neurologist I'd never heard of. Dr. Patricia Sanderson at UC Davis Medical Center. Patient Robert William Richardson. Date of examination April 15, 2024. Reason for referral. Assessment of mental capacity. Summary. Patient shows no signs of cognitive impairment or diminished capacity. Mental faculties remain sharp and decision-making ability intact. Patient is fully capable of making informed decisions regarding his estate and medical care. Brandon and Tyler had been telling people that Robert's illness was affecting his judgment, that he wasn't thinking clearly when he made decisions about his care, his business, his will. But this report proved otherwise. Robert had been completely mentally competent right up until the end. The final document in the folder was a copy of a different will, not the one Morrison had shown me yesterday, but one dated just 6 weeks before Robert's death. This will left everything to me. Not most things, not some things, everything. The house, the Tahoe cabin, the business assets, all of it. Brandon and Tyler each got $50,000 per year for 5 years paid out through a trust fund. But they couldn't access it all at once, and there was a clause: if evidence emerges of criminal activity related to the estate or the settler's final illness, all benefits are immediately revoked. A note in the margin in Robert's handwriting: original held by Mitchell and Associates, not Morrison. I sat back in my chair trying to process what I was reading. There were 2 wills. Brandon and Tyler had somehow gotten their hands on an old version or created a fake one and were using it to claim their inheritance. The real will, the one Robert had signed just weeks before he died, was safely hidden with a different law firm. But why hadn't this Mitchell person contacted me after Robert's funeral? Why was I only discovering this now? I picked up Robert's letter again and read the next paragraph. I know you're wondering why I didn't tell you about any of this while I was alive. The truth is, I needed to be certain of what they were planning. I needed evidence that would hold up in court. And I needed to protect you. If the boys knew you had this information, they might have done something desperate. They're in deeper trouble than they realize, and desperate people do dangerous things. The investigator James Mitchell has instructions to wait 7 days after my death before contacting you. By then, Brandon and Tyler will have shown their hand. You'll have seen the fake will. You'll understand what they're capable of. I'm sorry I had to do it this way, but I trust Mitchell, and I trust that you'll know what to do when the time comes. The boys think they're inheriting the house and the business. What they don't know is that I mortgaged both properties heavily over the past few months. The house has a $1.1 million lien against it. The business has been sold. I liquidated everything and moved it into the trust. They're not inheriting assets, Em. They're inheriting debt and empty shell companies. It's not about punishing them. It's about protecting you. They made their choices. Now they have to live with the consequences. I stared at the letter, hardly believing what I was reading. Robert had given his sons a poison pill disguised as an inheritance. The letter continued. The life insurance policy Morrison mentioned is real, but it's not for $200,000. It's for $500,000. There's also a second policy for $300,000 that the boys don't know about. $800,000 total, all going to you. As for those medical bills, they're already paid, Em. I took care of everything before I died. The debt Brandon told you about doesn't exist. It's another lie to pressure you into accepting their terms. I've set everything up so that you'll be financially secure for the rest of your life. You deserve that after everything you've done for me, for us. You gave up your teaching career to support me. You cared for me when I was sick. You loved me when my own sons couldn't be bothered to visit. I know this seems cruel to them, but I couldn't stand by and watch them steal from you the way they've been stealing from everyone else. You deserve better than what they were planning to give you. Call James Mitchell. He'll explain everything and help you navigate what comes next. I love you, Em. Always have, always will. Your Robert. I sat in that small, windowless room and cried. Not gentle tears, deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere primal. I cried for Robert, for the life we'd had, for the future we'd never see. I cried for the betrayal of his sons, for the cruelty of their greed. I cried for the relief of knowing I wasn't abandoned, that Robert had loved me enough to protect me even after death. When I finally stopped, my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen. But something had shifted inside me. I wasn't the helpless widow Brandon and Tyler thought I was. I was the woman Robert had trusted to fight back. I pulled out my phone and called the number on James Mitchell's card. Mitchell & Associates occupied a modest office building in Midtown on 21st Street, between a coffee shop and a yoga studio. No marble floors or mahogany desks here. Just practical furniture, file cabinets, and walls covered with licenses and certifications. James Mitchell himself was a surprise. I'd been expecting someone slick and corporate, but the man who stood up from behind his desk looked more like a favorite uncle. Late 50s graying hair, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore khakis and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Mrs. Richardson. He came around the desk to shake my hand. His grip was firm but gentle. I'm so sorry for your loss. Your husband was a good man. Everyone keeps saying that, I heard myself say. But if he was so good, why didn't he tell me what his sons were doing? Mitchell gestured to a chair. Because he wanted to protect you. May I? He pulled out a file, thick, well-organized, with tabs color-coded by topic. Robert came to me 4 months ago. He'd noticed some irregularities in his business accounts. Small things at first. Invoices that didn't match up. Transfers that he didn't remember authorizing. Brandon was stealing from him, I said. Brandon was forging his signature on loan documents, using the business and the house as collateral. Your husband didn't want to believe it at first, so he asked me to investigate quietly. Mitchell opened the file and spread out several documents. Bank records, loan applications, security camera footage printed on photo paper. This is Brandon at Wells Fargo on March 12th. He pointed to a timestamp. Signing papers to take out a $180,000 loan against your house. The signature on the documents is Robert's, but Robert was at his chemotherapy appointment that day. I have his medical records to prove it. I looked at the photo. Brandon in a suit, confident smile, shaking hands with a loan officer, stealing from his dying father without a shred of remorse. Tyler was worse, Mitchell continued. He's been running investment scams for the past 2 years, taking money from elderly clients promising high returns, then using their funds to cover his own expenses and losses. He showed me a list of names. Harold and Martha Peterson, ages 73 and 71, investment $90,000, loss total. Janet Wu, age 68, investment $55,000, loss total. These people lost their retirement savings because of Tyler, I said quietly. Yes, and he's facing potential criminal charges if they file complaints. He's desperate for money to make restitution before that happens. The pieces were falling into place. Brandon's gambling debts, Tyler's fraud victims, their sudden interest in Robert's estate after years of barely visiting. The will Morrison showed me, I said. The one that gives them everything. Is it real? Mitchell leaned back in his chair. It's real. It's just outdated. Robert wrote that will 3 years ago, shortly after your wedding anniversary. But he revised it multiple times after that. The final version, the one that supersedes all others, was executed 6 weeks before his death. He pulled out a document and handed it to me. I recognized the format, same legal language, same structure, but the contents were completely different. I, Robert William Richardson, being of sound mind and body, do hereby revoke all prior wills and codicils. I skimmed through the pages. Everything to me. The house, the Tahoe property, the trust fund, the business assets, all in my name. Brandon and Tyler each received $50,000 per year for 5 years, conditional on good behavior. This was notarized by someone other than Morrison, I noticed. Robert had concerns about Morrison's office. He suspected someone there was feeding information to Brandon, so he came to me for the final version. Can Morrison be disbarred for this? If we can prove he knew the will was outdated and presented it anyway, yes. If he was genuinely unaware and operating on old information, that's trickier. But either way, he should have done his due diligence. I set down the real will and looked at Mitchell. Why didn't you contact me right after Robert died? Why wait? Your husband's instructions were very specific. He wanted you to see what Brandon and Tyler would do if they thought they'd won. He wanted you to understand exactly what kind of men they'd become. And he wanted you to make the choice. What choice? Mitchell pulled out another document. Criminal charges. I have enough evidence here to send both Brandon and Tyler to prison. Brandon for elder abuse, forgery, and fraud. Tyler for embezzlement and running an illegal investment scheme. If you want to pursue this, the district attorney would be very interested. The thought sent a chill through me. Robert's son's in prison. His legacy tainted by scandal. Family holidays forever destroyed. What's the alternative? I asked. You invoke the clause in the real will. They're cut off from the trust fund completely. They receive nothing from Robert's estate. You keep everything just like he intended, but you don't press criminal charges. So they get away with it. They lose their inheritance. They still have their debts. Brandon owes $230,000. Tyler owes $220,000 to people who want their money back, and they have to live with what they did to their father. I thought about Robert and his hospital bed tubes and machines keeping him comfortable in those final days. Had he known even then that his sons were more interested in his bank account than his recovery? There's a third option, Mitchell said quietly. You could give them exactly what they tried to give you. I don't understand. The house they think they're inheriting, it has a $1.1 million mortgage against it. The value is $890,000. They'd be inheriting a property that's underwater by more than $200,000. Robert mortgaged our house. He did, and he moved all that money into the trust that only you can access. If you choose to gift them the house according to the terms of their fake will, they'll inherit the property and the debt. With their credit problems, they won't be able to refinance. They'll lose the house within months and still owe the deficiency balance. I sat back trying to process this. Robert had created a trap, a perfect, devastating trap. The Tahoe property is the same, Mitchell continued. $850,000 in liens on a property worth $780,000. So if I give them what they wanted, they get properties they can't afford and debts they can't pay, exactly what they were going to do to you. The justice of it was almost beautiful. Almost. I need time to think about this, I said. Of course, but Mrs. Richardson, there's one more thing you should know. Mitchell's expression grew serious. This morning I received a call from Brandon's attorney. They're planning to file a petition to take control of the estate within the next 48 hours. They want to freeze your access to Robert's accounts and force an immediate sale of the properties. Can they do that? Not legally, but they can tie things up in court for months. And in the meantime, you'd be fighting them with the resources from just that $200,000 insurance policy, the one they told you about. Not the real $800,000. Not the $4.7 million in the trust. They're trying to bankrupt me before I can fight back. Exactly. I looked down at my hands. 63 years old, and I'd never felt more tired. Or more angry. What do I do? I asked. Mitchell smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who'd been waiting for this question. We spring the trap, Mrs. Richardson. We give them exactly what they want. 3 days after my meeting with Mitchell, my phone rang. Tyler's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. Had to seem natural. Had to seem like the grieving widow they thought I was. Hello. Emily? Tyler's voice was warm, concerned. Everything Brandon wasn't. How are you holding up? I sat in Robert's chair, my chair now, and looked out at the garden. The roses needed deadheading. Robert had always done that. I'm managing, I said. It's hard. I know. Jessica and I were talking and we thought, well, we'd love to have you over for dinner tonight. Just family. Something low-key. Family. The word felt like broken glass in my mouth. That's very thoughtful, but I'm not sure I'm up for, please, Emily. We feel terrible about how businesslike everything has been. Brandon does too. We want you to know we're here for you. That we care. The lie was so smooth I almost believed it myself. What time? I asked. 7, nothing fancy. Jessica's making her pot roast. After I hung up, I called Mitchell. They're making their move, I said. Dinner tonight at Tyler's house. They'll probably have papers for you to sign. Don't sign anything. I won't. But Mitchell, I want to push them a little. See how they react. There was a pause. Be careful, Mrs. Richardson. Desperate people. Do dangerous things, I know. Robert wrote that in his letter. Your husband knew his sons well. Too well, I thought. That was the tragedy of it. Tyler and Jessica lived in Granite Bay, a wealthy suburb 40 minutes north of Sacramento. Their house was a monument to borrowed money, 6,000 square feet of marble countertops and vaulted ceilings and furniture that looked expensive but felt cheap. Jessica answered the door in designer jeans and a silk blouse. She'd always reminded me of a China doll. Pretty fragile, carefully maintained. Emily, she pulled me into a hug that smelled like Chanel No. 5. Come in, you look so thin. Are you eating? Everyone kept asking me that, as if food could fill the Robert-shaped hole in my life. Brandon was already there, standing in the living room with a scotch in his hand. He nodded at me. No hug, no warmth, just that slight acknowledgement. Mother, good to see you. That word again. Mother, not Emily, like he was trying the name on, seeing if it fit. The dining room table was set for 4. Crystal glasses, linen napkins, candles that probably cost more than my grocery budget for a month. Jessica had gone all out. During dinner, they were charming. Brandon asked about the house, whether I needed help with anything. Tyler talked about his consulting business, how busy he was with clients. Jessica showed me photos of their daughter Madison's dance recital. Normal family conversation. Except nothing about this family was normal anymore. Over dessert tiramisu from the expensive bakery, Brandon set down his fork. Emily, we wanted to talk to you about the estate situation. Here it comes, I thought. We know Morrison gave you a lot to process the other day, Tyler said. We want you to know we're not trying to rush you. That's kind of you. But, Brandon pulled a leather folder from the sideboard. Always with the folders. We do think it would be beneficial for everyone if we could start moving forward. For closure. He slid a document across the table. I recognized the format similar to what Morrison had shown me. This is just a simple transfer agreement, Tyler explained. It basically says you acknowledge the terms of Dad's will and agree to the distribution of assets as outlined. I picked up the paper but didn't read it. Morrison said I shouldn't sign anything without having my own attorney review it. Morrison is being overcautious, Brandon said. This is standard probate procedure. Still, I'd feel more comfortable if someone looked at it first. Someone who represents my interests, not the estate's. The temperature in the room dropped a few degrees. We are looking out for your interests, Tyler said. We're family. Of course you are. I set the paper down. That's why you won't mind if I take a few days to have this reviewed. Jessica jumped up suddenly. Coffee, anyone? I made decaf. She practically fled to the kitchen. I didn't blame her. The tension was thick enough to cut. Brandon leaned forward. Emily, I hope you're not planning to contest Dad's will. That would be unfortunate. Unfortunate how? Expensive, time-consuming, and ultimately pointless. Dad's wishes were very clear. Were they? I met his eyes. Because I've been going through Robert's things and I keep finding documents I don't understand. Bank statements for accounts I never knew existed. Business papers that don't match what Morrison showed me. Tyler's fork clattered against his plate. What kind of documents? Oh, I'm probably just confused. Legal paperwork has never been my strong suit. I smiled pleasantly. But I did find something interesting in Robert's desk. A key. Brandon went very still. A key. Small brass one. I have no idea what it opens. Do you? Dad had lots of keys, Tyler said quickly. The house, the garage, his file cabinets. That's what I thought. But this one was in an envelope with my name on it. And there was a note that said open when they show you the will. The silence stretched out. Jessica came back with the coffee, saw our faces, and set the tray down without a word. Did you open it? Brandon asked. His voice was carefully casual, but his knuckles were white around his Scotch glass. Not yet. I wasn't sure if I should. It feels like, I don't know, like Robert was trying to tell me something. I'm sure it's nothing important, Tyler said. Dad was on a lot of medication at the end. He wasn't always thinking clearly. Wasn't he? I took a sip of coffee. Because I also found a medical report from a neurologist. It said Robert's mental faculties were completely intact right up until he passed. Brandon stood up abruptly. I should get going. Early meeting tomorrow. Of course. I stood too. Thank you for dinner, Jessica. It was lovely. Tyler walked me to the door. At the threshold, he put his hand on my arm. Emily, about those documents you found, it might be best if you brought them to our next meeting. Let us help you make sense of everything. Dad's filing system was complicated. That's very sweet of you to offer. I patted his hand. But I think I'll manage. After all, I have plenty of time now. 3 weeks, isn't that what Brandon said? I left them standing in the doorway and walked to my car. In the rearview mirror, I could see Brandon had joined Tyler. They were arguing, their voices low and urgent. My phone rang before I even made it to the highway. Mitchell. How did it go? They're panicking, I said, and they're going to do something stupid very soon. The next morning, I met Mitchell at a coffee shop in Midtown. He'd chosen a table in the back corner away from the windows and the other customers. Old habits from his detective days, probably. He had his laptop open when I arrived. I've been going through the recordings, he said without preamble. Recordings, your husband asked me to document everything. Conversations with Brandon and Tyler, phone calls, meetings. He wanted irrefutable evidence. Mitchell turned the laptop toward me. You should hear this. He pressed play. Robert's voice filled my ears, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. It was so familiar, so real, like he was sitting right there with us. So you think Emily should get the life insurance and nothing else? Robert was saying. Brandon's voice answered. Dad, we're not trying to cut her out. We're just saying, look, she's still young enough to rebuild. She could get a job, maybe go back to teaching. And the house. Tyler and I have been talking. We think it makes sense for the family properties to stay in the bloodline. No offense to Emily, but she's not actually a Richardson. 19 years of marriage. 19 years of being his wife. And I wasn't actually a Richardson. I see, Robert said. His voice was calm, too calm. And you think that's fair? Fair, Tyler, this time. Dad, Emily knew what she was getting into when she married you. You already had grown sons. She can't expect to just inherit everything." Mitchell stopped the recording. "This was 3 months before Robert passed away," he said quietly. 2 weeks after his diagnosis. They were already planning how to divide up his assets. I felt sick. "Keep playing." He did. Robert's voice again. "What if I told you I know what you've been doing, Brandon?" A pause. Then, "I don't know what you mean." "The loan you took out against the house. The one with my forged signature." Silence. Long enough that I thought the recording had ended. Then Brandon, his voice tight. "Dad, I can explain. I'm sure you can. Just like Tyler can explain where Mrs. Peterson's $90,000 went. Dad, that was a legitimate investment. That you lost through negligence and poor judgment. Tell me, Tyler, have you told Emily about any of this? About the lawsuits you're facing? The restitution you owe?" "Emily doesn't need to know about my business affairs," Tyler said. "No, I suppose not. Just like she doesn't need to know that you've been planning to force her out of her own home the moment I die." The recording ended. I sat there staring at my coffee. It had gone cold. "There's more," Mitchell said. "Hours of it. Your husband was very thorough. He knew everything, and he didn't tell me. He was protecting you. If Brandon and Tyler had known that you knew, they might have hurt me. The thought hadn't occurred to me until now." "You really think they're capable of that?" Mitchell closed his laptop. "Mrs. Richardson's desperation makes people capable of things they never thought possible. Your husband understood that. That's why he set up this elaborate plan. He wanted you to have all the evidence before they knew you had it." I thought about last night's dinner, the way Brandon's hands had trembled slightly when I mentioned the key, the panic in Tyler's eyes. They were afraid. Good. "There's something else you should see," Mitchell said. He pulled out a manila folder. "The properties. Your husband didn't just mortgage them. He mortgaged them strategically. He showed me the loan documents. The house $1.1 million against a value of $890,000. But the loan had been taken out through a shell company, one that Brandon had created. Your husband let Brandon think he'd successfully forged the loan documents," Mitchell explained. "But Robert actually signed them himself. He just made sure the loan was structured so that whoever inherits the property inherits the debt. So if I give Brandon and Tyler the house, they inherit a property worth $890,000 with a debt of $1.1 million. They're immediately underwater by more than $200,000. And they can't refinance because of their credit problems." "Exactly. Within 6 months, the bank will foreclose. They'll lose the house and still owe the deficiency balance." It was brilliant. Cruel, but brilliant. "The Tahoe property is the same," Mitchell continued. $850,000 in mortgages on a property worth $780,000. If they try to sell to pay off the debt, they'll still owe $70,000 and have nothing to show for it. I looked at the documents spread across the table. Robert had thought of everything, every angle, every possibility. "How much time do I have?" I asked. "Brandon filed a petition this morning to expedite the probate process. The hearing is scheduled for Friday, 3 days from now." "What happens at the hearing?" "He'll ask the judge to validate the will Morrison presented. If the judge agrees, the assets start transferring immediately. You'd have to file a counter-petition, which would take time you might not have." "But I have the real will, the one Robert signed 6 weeks before he died." "We'll present it at the hearing. But Mrs. Richardson, you need to understand Brandon has Morrison backing him up. Morrison is a respected attorney with a good reputation. When we show up with a different will from a small private investigation firm, there will be questions. So we need to be ready to answer them." Mitchell smiled. "Your husband chose well when he married you. You're tougher than those boys realize." I thought about Robert in his hospital bed planning all of this while he was dying, making sure I'd be protected, making sure his sons would face consequences for their greed. "I want to see the rest of the recordings," Oz said. "Are you sure some of it is difficult to hear?" "I'm sure." We spent the next 2 hours in that coffee shop listening to Robert document his son's betrayal. Every conversation, every meeting, every casual lie they told about caring for their father while they plotted to steal from him. The worst part was hearing Robert's voice grow weaker as the cancer progressed. In the early recordings, he sounded like himself, strong, confident. But by the end, he was clearly struggling to breathe. pausing frequently, his voice thin and reedy. And still he kept recording, kept gathering evidence, kept protecting me. By the time we finished, I was crying again. But these weren't tears of grief. These were tears of rage. "Friday," I said, wiping my eyes. "What do I need to do to be ready?" Mitchell pulled out a checklist. "First, we need character witnesses. People who can testify that Robert was mentally competent and that he expressed concerns about his son's behavior. His doctor, the neurologist who evaluated him. Already subpoenaed. Anyone else?" I thought about it. Margaret, my neighbor. Robert talked to her about his worries. And his accountant Paul Chen. Robert told him about the irregularities he'd noticed. "Good. I'll contact them today." Mitchell made notes. "Second, we need to be prepared for Morrison to claim our will is a forgery." "Can he do that?" "He can claim it. Whether a judge believes him is another matter. But we have the original with proper witnesses and notarization. We're on solid ground." "What about the criminal charges against Brandon and Tyler?" Mitchell's expression grew serious. "That's your decision, Mrs. Richardson. I can present all of this evidence to the district attorney. With what we have, the forged loan documents, the embezzlement, the elder abuse, they'd likely prosecute. But you need to understand what that means. Prison. For both of them. Brandon could get 5 to 10 years. Tyler 7 to 12. I thought about Robert's sons in prison. Orange jumpsuits, visiting hours, the family name destroyed. I don't have to decide now, do I? No, but soon. But the statute of limitations is running on some of this. My phone buzzed. A text from Brandon. "We need to talk, today. It's urgent." I showed it to Mitchell. "They know something's wrong," he said, "but they don't know what. That's your advantage right now." I texted back, "I'm busy today. Tomorrow morning." The response came immediately. "Tonight, my office, 8 p.m. Don't bring anyone." Mitchell shook his head. "Don't go alone. That's, I know, dangerous, but I need to see what they're planning." I typed another message. "Fine, 8 p.m. Mrs. Richardson, I'll be careful. And Mitchell, I want you listening. Can you do that?" He pulled a small device from his pocket. "Recording device. Completely legal as long as you're part of the conversation. Put it in your purse." I took the device. It was smaller than a lipstick tube. "One more thing," Mitchell said. "If they threaten you in any way, physically, financially, anything, you leave immediately and call 911. Promise me." I promise. But even as I said it, I knew I was walking into danger. Robert's sons were desperate, and desperate people, as I was learning, were capable of almost anything. Brandon's law office was in a high-rise downtown 23rd floor with a view of the Capitol building. I'd been here once before years ago for a Christmas party Robert had insisted we attend. The office was all glass and chrome and expensive furniture. Success wrapped in leather and mahogany. But knowing what I knew now, it all looked different. All of this, the view, the furniture, the prestigious address built on borrowed money and stolen funds. Brandon's secretary had already left for the day. The office was dark except for the light coming from the conference room at the end of the hall. I walked toward it, my heels clicking on the marble floor. The recording device in my purse felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Brandon stood when I entered. No Tyler this time. Just Brandon, his tie loosened, his jacket off, looking tired and angry. "Close the door," he said. I did, but I left my purse open on the table, the recording device positioned toward him. "Sit down, Emily, please." I sat. The conference table was massive seats for 12, but Brandon came around and sat right next to me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Too close. "We have a problem," he said. You've been asking questions, making calls. Morrison told me you requested copies of all of Dad's financial records going back 5 years. I had. Mitchell's idea. Shake the tree and see what falls out. "I'm trying to understand Robert's estate," he said. "Is that wrong?" "It's suspicious. You're acting like you don't trust the will." "Should I trust it?" Brandon's jaw tightened. "Dad left very specific instructions. You need to accept that." "I will, once I understand them." He stood up and paced to the window. The Sacramento skyline glittered below us. All those people living normal lives. All those people who didn't have to navigate family betrayal and forged documents. "You found something," Brandon said. It wasn't a question. "In Dad's desk, that key you mentioned." "Yes." "What did it open?" "I'm not sure yet." He turned to face me. Don't lie to me, Emily. I know you've been to First National Bank. I know you accessed a safety deposit box. What was in it? My heart pounded. He'd been following me, or having me followed. Documents, I said carefully. Papers I don't understand. Legal things. What kind of legal things? I don't know. That's why I'm having them reviewed by an attorney. What attorney? His voice was sharp now. Morrison is Dad's attorney. If you found documents, they should go to him. Should they? Even if those documents suggest Morrison might not have all the facts? Brandon came back to the table. He didn't sit this time. He stood over me, and for the first time I felt genuinely afraid. Listen to me very carefully, he said. You're in over your head. You don't understand the complexity of Dad's business affairs. You're going to make mistakes that will cost you everything. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. You're 63 years old with no job and no marketable skills. The $200,000 from the insurance, that's your lifeline. Don't waste it on lawyers who will bleed you dry fighting a battle you can't win. I stood up too. I wasn't going to let him intimidate me. Robert promised me I'd be taken care of, I said quietly. He looked me in the eye and promised. So either he lied to me, which I don't believe, or you're not telling me the truth about his will. Dad made those promises before he got sick, before the medical bills started piling up. Things changed. Did they, or did you change them? His hand slammed down on the table. The sound echoed through the empty office. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? I grabbed my purse. Time to go. Mitchell had been right. This was dangerous. I think we're done here. We're not done. Sit down. No. I walked toward the door, but Brandon moved faster. He stepped in front of it, blocking my exit. You're not leaving until we settle this. My hand found my phone in my purse. One button press, and Mitchell would be listening live. Brandon, move. Sign the papers, Emily. Accept the terms of the will. Take your insurance money and start over somewhere else. It's the smart play. And if I don't, his smile was cold. Then you'll find out what happens when you fight us. Tyler and I have lawyers. Good ones. We'll tie up the estate in court for years. We'll challenge every document you produce. We'll make your life hell until you give up or run out of money. You'd do that to your father's widow. I'd do that to anyone trying to steal my inheritance. Something in me snapped. All the fear, all the grief, all the rage I'd been holding back, it came out in a rush. Your inheritance, Robert earned every penny of his money. Robert built his business. Robert bought the house and the Tahoe property. And you stole from him while he was dying. You forged his signature. You planned to throw me out on the street with nothing. Brandon's face went pale. I don't know what you think you know. I know everything, Brandon. The loan you took out against the house, the gambling debts, Tyler's failed investments and the clients he stole from. I know about all of it. You can't prove anything. Can't I? I pulled out my phone and played one of Mitchell's recordings. Robert's voice filled the conference room. The loan you took out against the house, the one with my forged signature. Brandon's voice. Dad, I can explain. I stopped the playback. Brandon stared at the phone like it was a snake. Your father knew what you were doing, I said, and he made sure I'd find out. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to move away from that door. I'm going to leave. And on Friday at the probate hearing, we're going to let a judge decide who's telling the truth. For a long moment, Brandon didn't move. Then slowly he stepped aside. I walked past him, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. Emily. His voice stopped me at the door. You make an enemy of me, you'll regret it. I promise you that. I turned back to look at him. Robert's son, the boy who'd called me Mom at our wedding, the man who'd just threatened me in his office. I already regret it, I said. I regret that Robert's sons turned out to be the kind of men who'd betray their own father. I left him standing there and didn't look back. Mitchell was waiting in the parking garage when I got to my car. He'd been listening to the entire conversation. Are you okay? He looked genuinely concerned. I'm furious and scared, and I laughed, surprising myself. I'm ready to destroy them. The recording is clear. Brandon essentially admitted to the forgery. Will it hold up in court? Absolutely, especially combined with everything else we have. Mitchell leaned against my car. But Mrs. Richardson, I need to ask you something. What do you actually want to happen here? I'd been thinking about this for days. I want them to understand what they did. I want them to face consequences. But I paused. I don't want to destroy them completely. They're still Robert's sons. Even after what they tried to do to you, Robert loved them. Despite everything, he loved them. If I send them to prison, I'm not honoring his memory. I'm just getting revenge. Mitchell nodded slowly. So what's the alternative? We go to the hearing Friday. We present the real will. We expose the forgery. But instead of pressing criminal charges, I offer them a choice. What kind of choice? I'd worked this out in my head during the drive. They can accept the terms of Robert's real will, $50,000 a year for 5 years, paid through the trust, but only if Brandon enters a treatment program for gambling addiction, and only if Tyler makes restitution to his fraud victims. They'll never agree to that. Then they can refuse, and I'll give them exactly what they tried to give me. Mitchell frowned. I don't understand. The house and the Tahoe property, with all their mortgages and liens, they wanted those properties so badly they can have them, and the debts that come with them. Understanding dawned in Mitchell's eyes. That's cruel, yes, but it's what they were going to do to me. And unlike prison, it gives them a chance to learn from their mistakes. If they're smart, they'll walk away and accept the trust fund terms. If they're greedy, they'll take the properties and destroy themselves financially. Your husband would be proud of you. Would he? I wasn't sure. Or would he think I'm being too soft? He left you the choice for a reason, Mrs. Richardson. He trusted your judgment. We stood there in the parking garage, 2 people planning how to spring a trap that a dead man had set for his own sons. Friday, Mitchell said. We need to be prepared for anything. Brandon is going to bring everything he has. So will we. Over the next 3 days, Mitchell and I worked around the clock. We lined up witnesses. We organized documents. We prepared for every possible argument Morrison and Brandon might make. Margaret testified that Robert had expressed concerns about his son's financial problems and moral character just weeks before he died. Dr. Sanderson from UC Davis provided detailed testimony about Robert's mental competency. Paul Chen, the accountant, brought records showing the irregularities Robert had flagged in his business accounts. The evidence was overwhelming. Thursday night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Robert, about the life we'd built together, about how it had all come down to this, a courtroom battle with his own children. At 2 a.m., I went down to his office and sat in his chair. The house was so quiet. Too quiet. I missed the sound of him moving around making coffee in the early morning, humming tunelessly while he worked. My phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. Emily, please. We can work this out without lawyers. Can we talk just you and me? I stared at the message. Tyler had always been the softer of the 2 brothers, the one who seemed like he might have a conscience buried somewhere under the greed. I texted back, tomorrow, after the hearing. We'll see what there is to talk about. His response came immediately. I'm sorry, for all of it. Dad would be ashamed of us. I didn't reply, because he was right. Robert would be ashamed. But he'd also known this was coming. He'd seen who his sons really were long before I had. Friday morning dawned clear and hot. Sacramento in late July, the temperature already climbing toward triple digits by 9 a.m. I dressed carefully. Navy blue suit, professional but not aggressive. Pearl earrings Robert had given me for our 15th anniversary. My hair pulled back in a simple bun. I looked like a widow. I felt like a warrior. Mitchell met me outside the courthouse. Ready, ready. We walked into Superior Court Department 14 together. Brandon was already there with Morrison. Tyler sat beside them looking pale and miserable. A few rows back, I spotted Jessica Tyler's wife crying quietly into a tissue. The judge was Miriam Walsh, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes. She'd seen it all in 30 years on the bench. She wasn't going to be swayed by charm or smooth talking. This is a petition to expedite probate in the matter of the estate of Robert William Richardson, she began. Mr. Morrison, you're representing the petitioners. Morrison stood. Yes, Your Honor. Brandon and Tyler Richardson, the decedent's sons. And you are? Judge Walsh looked at Mitchell. James Mitchell, Your Honor. Representing Emily Richardson, the decedent's widow. Brandon shot me a look of pure hatred. Let's proceed, Judge Walsh said. Mr. Morrison, present your case. Morrison laid out the will, the standard version, the one that gave Brandon and Tyler everything and left me with crumbs. This will was executed 3 years ago and has remained unchanged, Morrison said confidently. It clearly expresses Mr. Richardson's wishes regarding the distribution of his estate. Mrs. Richardson contests this, the judge asked. Mitchell stood. We do, Your Honor. We have evidence that this will was superseded by a later version executed just 6 weeks before Mr. Richardson's death. He handed copies to the judge and to Morrison. I watched Morrison's face as he read. The confidence drained away, replaced by confusion and then horror. Your Honor, Morrison said, I have no record of this document. This is highly irregular. It's completely regular, Mitchell countered. Mr. Richardson chose to execute his final will through my office rather than yours. He had concerns about information security. Concerns? What kind of concerns? Judge Walsh held up her hand. Gentlemen, let's focus on the validity of the documents. Mr. Mitchell, can you establish the chain of custody for this will? Yes, Your Honor. Mitchell called his witnesses one by one. The notary who'd witnessed Robert's signature, Dr. Sanderson, who testified about Robert's mental competency, Margaret, who described conversations where Robert expressed his true intentions. With each witness, I watched Brandon's face grow darker. Tyler just looked sick. Finally, Mitchell played the recordings. Robert's voice filled the courtroom. Every conversation, every lie Brandon and Tyler had told, every plan they'd made to steal from their dying father. When the playback ended, the silence was deafening. Judge Walsh looked at Brandon and Tyler. Do you have any response to this? Brandon started to speak, but Morrison put his hand on his arm. Your Honor, we request a recess to review this new evidence. Denied. Mr. Morrison, did you know about any of this? The forged loans, the fraud. I did not, Your Honor. Did you verify that the will you submitted was the most recent version? Morrison's silence was answer enough. Judge Walsh closed the file in front of her. I'm invalidating the will presented by Mr. Morrison. The will executed 6 weeks before Mr. Richardson's death appears to be valid and properly witnessed. All assets will be distributed according to its terms. Brandon shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is— Sit down, Mr. Richardson. The judge's voice was ice. I'm also referring this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation of potential fraud and elder abuse. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel came down. It was over. The courthouse steps were crowded with people heading to lunch. Normal people with normal problems. Traffic tickets, small claims, divorce paperwork. None of them had just watched their stepson's entire life collapse in a courtroom. I sat on a bench in the shade trying to process what had just happened. Mitchell stood nearby on the phone with someone, probably his office. Brandon and Tyler had left through a side exit, Morrison trailing behind them like a whipped dog. My phone buzzed. Margaret. I saw it on the court docket website. You won? I won. Then why do you sound like someone died? Because now I have to decide what to do with it. The victory. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Come over for lunch. You shouldn't be alone right now. But I wanted to be alone. I needed to think. Tomorrow, I promised. I need tonight to figure this out. After I hung up, Mitchell came over and sat beside me. The DA's office just called. They want to meet Monday morning to discuss the case against Brandon and Tyler. What would they charge them with? Elder abuse for Brandon, grand larceny, forgery. For Tyler, embezzlement, wire fraud, running an illegal investment scheme. He paused. They're looking at serious prison time. Brandon could get 7 to 10 years. Tyler 8 to 12. I watched a young mother walk by holding her daughter's hand. The little girl was maybe 5, wearing a pink dress and light-up sneakers. She was singing something I couldn't make out the words, but she looked so happy. What if I don't want them to go to prison? I asked. Mitchell had been expecting this. I could tell. Then you tell the DA you're not interested in pursuing charges. Without your cooperation as the primary witness, their case falls apart. But they'd get away with it. They'd lose their inheritance. They'd still have their debts. That's not nothing. No, it wasn't nothing. But was it enough? I need to talk to them, I said. Brandon and Tyler, before I make any decisions. Mrs. Richardson. I know, it's probably stupid, but I can't send Robert's sons to prison without at least, I don't know, trying to understand why they did this. Mitchell looked at me for a long moment. Your husband chose well when he married you. You have more compassion than most people would in your position. Or I'm just a fool. Sometimes those are the same thing, and sometimes they're not. I called Tyler that evening. He answered on the first ring. Emily, We need to talk, all three of us. You, me, and Brandon. Brandon doesn't want to. I don't care what Brandon wants. Tell him if he doesn't show up tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. at the house on Elm Street, I'm meeting with the district attorney Monday and pressing every charge Mitchell can think of. Tyler sucked in a breath. You'd really do that? Try me. He was quiet. Then, we'll be there. Saturday morning I made coffee, strong and black the way Robert used to like it. I set out 3 cups on the kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten 19 years of breakfast together. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 a.m. Brandon's doing. He'd always been punctual. I opened the door. Brandon stood there in jeans and a polo shirt. No suit today, no armor. He looked tired, older than his 45 years. Tyler stood behind him, hands shoved in his pockets like a teenager waiting for punishment. Come in, I said. They followed me to the kitchen. I gestured to the chairs, but Brandon remained standing. Let's get this over with, he said. What do you want? Sit down, Brandon. I'd rather sit down. Something in my voice made him comply. He pulled out a chair and sat stiffly, arms crossed. Tyler took the seat next to him. I poured coffee for all of us. Nobody drank. I've been thinking about what happens next, I began. The DA wants to prosecute you both. Mitchell has given them all the evidence. If I cooperate, you'll both go to prison. For a long time. Tyler's hands shook. He pressed them flat on the table to hide it. We know, Brandon said quietly, but I'm not sure that's what Robert would have wanted. Brandon's head snapped up. Dad set us up. He created this whole trap to destroy us. No, he created this trap to protect me. There's a difference. Is there? Brandon's voice was bitter. He recorded our conversations. He hired investigators. He mortgaged properties just to make us fail. That's not protection. That's revenge. Is it a father trying to teach his sons a lesson about consequences? We don't need lessons from you, Brandon spat. Clearly you do, because you stole from your dying father. You forged his signature. You planned to leave me homeless and penniless. So yes, Brandon, you need a lesson in basic human decency. Tyler flinched. Brandon just stared at his coffee. I'm going to give you a choice, I continued. 3 options. You can pick which one you want. What kind of choice? Tyler asked. I pulled out the documents Mitchell and I had prepared. Option 1, I press charges. Full cooperation with the DA. You both go to prison. When you get out, you have nothing. No trust fund, no inheritance, nothing but criminal records and ruined reputations. I slid the first document across the table. Neither of them touched it. Option 2, you walk away. No charges, but you also get nothing from Robert's estate. No trust fund, no annual payments. You're cut off completely. You deal with your debts on your own. The second document joined the first. Option 3, I took a breath. You accept the terms of Robert's real will, $50,000 a year for 5 years paid through the trust, but there are conditions. What conditions? Brandon asked suspiciously. Brandon, you enter a residential treatment program for gambling addiction. 90 days minimum. Then continued counseling for at least a year. His face flushed. I don't have a gambling problem. You owe $230,000 to casinos and bookies. That's not a problem. He looked away. Tyler, I turned to the younger brother. You make full restitution to your fraud victims, every penny they lost. I'll loan you the money interest-free and you'll pay me back over 10 years from your trust fund payments. Tyler's eyes filled with tears. That's more than $200,000. $220,000 to be exact. Which means after restitution you'll have about $30,000 a year from the trust for 5 years. Just enough to live on if you're careful. Not enough to fund the lifestyle you've been pretending to have. This is extortion, Brandon said. No, this is mercy. More mercy than you showed me when you tried to throw me out of my home with $35,000. The silence stretched out. Outside I could hear kids playing in the neighbor's yard. Normal summer sounds, normal life continuing while we sat here dividing up the pieces of a family. And if we refuse all 3 options, Brandon asked, then I pick for you, and I promise you won't like my choice. Tyler wiped his eyes. Can we have time to think about it? You have until 5 p.m. today. Then I'm calling the DA. They stood to leave. At the door, Tyler turned back. Emily, I'm sorry. For all of it. Dad deserved better. And so did you. Yes, I said. He did. After they left, I sat alone in the kitchen and cried. Not gentle tears this time. Hard, painful sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep in my chest. I was doing the right thing. I knew I was. But it hurt anyway. At 3 p.m., my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting them for 2 more hours, but when I opened the door, Brandon stood there alone. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He walked to the living room and stood looking at the photographs on the mantel. Robert at Lake Tahoe. Robert and me on our wedding day. Robert holding baby Madison Tyler's daughter. "I need to tell you something," Brandon said, "before you make your final decision." "Okay." He sat down heavily on the couch. 6 months before Dad died. We had a fight. A bad one. I sat across from him. About money. About everything. He'd found out about the loan I'd taken out. The forged signature. He confronted me and I lost it. Started yelling. We were in his car and I grabbed the wheel. My blood went cold. We crashed. Into a light pole on J Street. Dad hit his head on the steering wheel. Not bad, just a cut that needed a few stitches. But he went to the doctor to get checked out, and that's when they found it. Found what? Brandon's voice broke. The cancer. The doctor ordered a CT scan because of the head injury. That's how they discovered the tumor. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer. If we hadn't crashed, if he hadn't gone to the doctor, he might not have known until it was too late to even try treatment. I couldn't breathe. You caused the accident that led to his diagnosis. I caused the accident. The cancer was already there. But yeah, the crash is why he found out when he did. Does Tyler know? No. Dad made me promise not to tell him. He didn't want Tyler to hate me. Brandon laughed bitterly. Even then, even after what I'd done, Dad was protecting me. Why are you telling me this now? He looked at me, and for the first time I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. Because you deserve to know what kind of person you're showing mercy to. I'm not worth it, Emily. I grabbed the wheel because I was angry about money. I could have killed him. And then I spent the last 6 months of his life plotting to steal from both of you. Brandon, take option 1. Send me to prison. It's what I deserve. He stood up to leave, but I stopped him. Sit down. Emily. Sit down. He sat. Robert knew, I said, about the accident, about your guilt. That's why he set this up the way he did. He wasn't trying to destroy you. He was trying to save you from yourself. How is any of this saving me? Because he gave you a choice. Prison or change. Destruction or redemption. He loved you, Brandon. Even after everything. And he believed... My voice cracked. He believed that somewhere under all the anger and the gambling and the greed, there was still the boy who used to go fishing with him at Tahoe. Brandon's face crumpled. That boy died a long time ago. Did he? Or did he just get lost? For a long moment, Brandon sat there crying. Not the controlled tears of a man trying to maintain dignity. Real ugly, broken sobs. When he finally stopped, he wiped his face with his sleeve. I'll do it. Option 3. The treatment program, all of it. I don't know if it'll work, but I'll try. That's all Robert wanted. For you to try. What about Tyler? That's Tyler's choice. But Brandon, if you start this and quit halfway through if you violate the terms in any way, the deal is off. I'll give the evidence to the DA and you'll face charges. Understood. Understood. He left through the front door, shoulders slumped, looking nothing like the confident lawyer who tried to intimidate me in his office a week ago. At 4:30 p.m., Tyler called. I'll do it. Option 3. I'll make it right with the people I hurt. You're sure? Dad always said, his voice caught. He always said a man is only as good as his word. I gave my word to those people that their money was safe. I need to honor that even if it takes 10 years. After I hung up, I called Mitchell. They both chose option 3. Are you satisfied with that decision? Was I honestly didn't know, but it felt right. It felt like what Robert would have wanted. Yes, I said. I'm satisfied. Monday morning, I met with Assistant District Attorney Patricia Reyes in her office at the Sacramento County Courthouse. Mitchell had come with me, but I'd asked him to wait outside. This conversation needed to be between me and the prosecutor. Reyes was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She had the case file spread across her desk when I arrived. Mrs. Richardson, I've reviewed all the evidence Mr. Mitchell provided. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of elder abuse and fraud I've seen. She leaned forward. With your testimony, we can put both Brandon and Tyler Richardson away for significant time. They deserve to be punished for what they did to your husband. I'm not pressing charges, I said. Her pen stopped mid-note. Excuse me. I'm not going to cooperate with the prosecution. I want the investigation dropped. Mrs. Richardson, these men tried to steal your husband's entire estate. They forged documents, committed fraud, planned to leave you destitute. I know what they did. I was there. Then why protect them? I looked at the photograph on her desk. 2 kids, maybe 8 and 10, smiling at the camera. Do you have a good relationship with your children, Ms. Reyes? Yes. What does that have to my husband didn't? He tried for 45 years, but he never quite connected with his sons. And when he was dying, when he knew he had 6 months left, he didn't spend that time hating them. He spent it trying to protect them from themselves. By setting them up to fail. By giving them a choice. That's all any parent can do, really. Present the options and hope your children choose wisely. I stood up. They've chosen. They're going to treatment, making restitution, living on modest means while they rebuild their lives. That's justice, Ms. Reyes. Maybe not the kind you're used to, but it's the kind my husband wanted. She studied me for a long moment. You're either incredibly forgiving or incredibly naive. Maybe both, but it's my decision to make. What about Morrison? He presented a fraudulent will in probate court. He was negligent, not criminal. The state bar can handle that. Reyes closed the file. If you change your mind, I won't. But as I left her office, I wondered if I was making a mistake. Wondered if Robert would be disappointed that I'd chosen mercy over justice. Mitchell was waiting in the hallway. How did she take it? About as well as you'd expect. She thinks I'm making a mistake. Are you? Ask me in 5 years when we see if Brandon and Tyler actually follow through. That afternoon, I met with David Morrison one last time. His office felt different now, smaller, shabbier. Or maybe it was just that I saw him differently. He couldn't meet my eyes when I walked in. Emily, thank you for coming. I'm here to get the rest of Robert's files, the ones you've been holding. Of course, I've prepared everything. He gestured to 3 banker's boxes stacked by the door. I also wanted to apologize. I should have verified that will more carefully. I should have asked more questions. Yes, you should have. I've reported myself to the state bar. I'll likely be suspended for at least a year. He finally looked at me. I want you to know I had no idea about the forgery, the fraud. Brandon told me he'd found an updated will in his father's papers. I trusted him because he was Robert's son. And because he paid you $50,000? Morrison's face went red. That was a consulting fee for David. Don't. We both know what it was. He nodded slowly. You're right. I'm sorry. I picked up one of the boxes. Robert trusted you for 12 years. You should have honored that trust. I know. As I loaded the boxes into my car, I felt a strange sense of closure. Morrison would face professional consequences. Brandon and Tyler would face personal ones. And I had to figure out what came next. 2 weeks later, Brandon entered New Horizons Treatment Center in Northern California. It was a 90-day residential program specializing in gambling addiction. Expensive $40,000, but I paid for it from the trust. An investment in Robert's son, and maybe in the possibility of redemption. Tyler started working with a victim's advocate to contact the people he'd defrauded. Mrs. Peterson cried when he called to apologize and promise restitution. Mr. Wu hung up on him. Janet Chen listened quietly and then said, I'm 68 years old. I may not live long enough to see all my money back, but I appreciate you trying. I watched all of this from a distance, receiving monthly reports from Mitchell, but not directly contacting either Brandon or Tyler. They needed space to do their work without me hovering like some kind of moral overseer. In September, I listed the Elm Street house for sale. Too many memories. Too many ghosts. A young family bought it, parents in their 30s with twin toddlers. They loved the garden, the wraparound porch, the built-in bookshelves in the office. My husband is a reader too, the wife said, running her hand along the shelf where Robert kept his Hemingways. I smiled. Then he'll be happy here. With the money from the sale, I bought a small cottage in Carmel. Not Carmel by the sea with the mansions and the tourist crowds, but a quieter neighborhood a few blocks inland. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a tiny garden where I could grow herbs and flowers. It cost half what the Sacramento house sold for, leaving me with a comfortable cushion plus the trust fund income. I'd never have to worry about money again. But I'd always worry about other things. 6 months after the probate hearing, I was finally settling into my new life. The cottage had good light in the mornings. I'd set up an easel in the second bedroom and started painting again, something I hadn't done since before I married Robert. Watercolors mostly. The ocean, the cypress trees, the fog rolling in from Monterey Bay. I joined a local book club, started volunteering at the animal shelter on Tuesday mornings, made friends with my neighbor, a retired teacher named Dorothy, who grew prize-winning roses and made terrible jokes. It was a quiet life, a small life, but it was mine. In November, I received my first report from Brandon's treatment center. He'd completed the 90-day program and was continuing with outpatient therapy. His counselor noted that he was making significant progress in understanding the root causes of his addictive behavior. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but I hoped it was good. Tyler's report was more concrete. He'd paid back $60,000 to his victims so far, working 2 jobs, one as a financial advisor at a small firm, one doing bookkeeping on weekends. Jessica had gone back to work too, teaching kindergarten. "It's hard," Tyler wrote in a short note included with the report. "But it's honest work. Dad would approve. Would he?" I wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe that Robert could see his sons trying, however imperfectly, to be better. Christmas approached. I'd been dreading it my first holiday season without Robert. Last year, even though he was sick, we decorated the tree together. He'd worn a Santa hat and made terrible puns about sprucing up the place and having a pine old time. I cried for 3 days after Thanksgiving, missing him so much it felt like a physical pain. Margaret called from Sacramento. "Come back for the holidays. Stay with me. You shouldn't be alone." "I need to be alone," I said. "Just this once, to figure out who I am now. Who you've always been, Em. Robert's death didn't change that. But it had. I wasn't Robert's wife anymore. Wasn't Brandon and Tyler's stepmother. Wasn't the woman who managed the household and entertained business associates and smoothed over family conflicts. I was just Emily, and I was still figuring out what that meant. On Christmas Eve, I received a package. No return address, just a Sacramento postmark. Inside was a small wooden box hand-carved with a note tucked under the lid. "Emily," it read. I made this in group therapy. The counselor said I should create something meaningful for someone I'd hurt. I know a box doesn't make up for what I did. Nothing could. But I wanted you to have something to remember that I'm trying. I'm 90 days sober from gambling. 90 days of actually dealing with my problems instead of running from them. Dad always said the first step was the hardest. He was right about that. He was right about a lot of things. Thank you for giving me the chance to prove him right about one more thing that I could change if I wanted to badly enough. B. I sat on my couch holding that box and cried. Not sad tears this time. Something more complicated. Relief, maybe. Or hope. The box was beautiful. Simple but carefully made, the wood sanded smooth, the corners perfectly joined. Brandon had always been good with his hands. I'd forgotten that about him. I put the box on my mantel next to the photograph of Robert and me at Lake Tahoe. In January, I started a new project. I'd been thinking about it for months, but hadn't quite worked up the courage. The Floyd Richardson Foundation for Financial Justice. Not Floyd, Robert William Richardson. The foundation would provide legal support and financial education for victims of family financial abuse, people who'd been stolen from by their own children, their spouses, their trustees. People like the ones Tyler had defrauded. I funded it with $200,000 from the trust, a small amount to start, but enough to help a few people. Mitchell agreed to serve on the board. So did Sarah Chen, the attorney who'd helped us at the probate hearing. Our first client was Martha Peterson. She'd been swindled out of $90,000 by Tyler, and even with his restitution payments, she was struggling. We helped her navigate the legal system, got her some money back from another investment scam, connected her with social services. "You didn't have to do this," she said when we met in Mitchell's office. "Your stepson already stole from me once. Why would you help? Because you deserved better, and because someone I loved would have wanted me to." It wasn't the legacy Brandon and Tyler had expected Robert to leave, but it was the legacy he deserved. Spring came to Carmel. The ice plant bloomed on the cliffs, covering the rocky slopes in brilliant magenta. The tourist season started up again, bringing crowds and noise and life to the quiet town. I'd been living in the cottage for 8 months. I was 64 now, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I knew who I was. Not Robert's wife, not a stepmother, not a victim, just Emily. A woman who'd survived betrayal and grief and come out the other side with her heart still intact. On a Tuesday morning in April, I found a postcard in my mailbox. The front showed a photograph of Sacramento, the Capitol building at sunset, the Tower Bridge spanning the river. Tourist kitsch, the kind you could buy at any gift shop downtown. I turned it over. No signature, just one line written in handwriting I recognized. Thank you for believing I could be the son Dad deserved. I'm trying to prove you right. B. I stood there in my driveway holding that postcard and felt something break open in my chest. Not sadness, not quite joy. Something in between. Something that felt like forgiveness beginning even though I wasn't sure I was ready for it yet. I went inside and put the postcard on my refrigerator held up by a magnet shaped like a lighthouse. Every morning when I made coffee, I'd see it. A reminder that people could change. That mercy wasn't weakness. That sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing were the same thing. That evening, I sat on my porch watching the fog roll in from the ocean. The air smelled like salt and cypress and something indefinably green. A hummingbird visited the fuchsia hanging by the door. Normal things. Beautiful things. My phone rang. Tyler. I almost didn't answer. We hadn't spoken directly since that meeting in the kitchen last July. All our communication had been through Mitchell and the monthly reports, but something made me pick up. Emily, I hope I'm not bothering you. You're not. I wanted to tell you myself. I made the last restitution payment today, to Mrs. Peterson. Every person I stole from has been paid back in full. That's wonderful, Tyler. It took everything from the trust fund. Jessica and I are living on our salaries now, which isn't much, but we're making it work. He paused. Dad would be proud, don't you think? Would he? Robert had loved his sons, but he'd also been disappointed by them for so long. Would he be proud now, or would he need to see more proof of change? I think, I said carefully, that Robert would be glad you're trying. That's all any of us can do. Emily, I know I have no right to ask this, but Madison, my daughter, she asks about you sometimes. She remembers you from family gatherings when she was little. She wants to know if maybe we could visit sometime. Not soon. I understand if you need more time. But eventually. I thought about Madison, 7 years old now with Tyler's soft eyes and Jessica's blonde hair. Robert had adored her, kept a photo of her on his desk. Eventually, I said. Let's see how the next few months go. Thank you. That's more than I deserve. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness and thought about forgiveness. Real forgiveness, not the kind you forced because you thought you should, but the kind that grew slowly, tentatively, like the first flowers after a long winter. I wasn't there yet. Maybe I'd never be there completely, but I could see the path now, could imagine a future where Brandon and Tyler weren't the villains in my story, just flawed people who'd made terrible choices and were trying to do better. Was that enough? Was it justice? Was it what Robert wanted? I pulled out my phone and looked at the last photo I had of him, taken 2 weeks before he died in his hospital room. He was thin pale, but smiling at something I'd said. His eyes were clear and full of love. Did I do the right thing? I whispered to the photograph. He didn't answer. Of course he didn't. But I thought I knew what he'd say. You gave them a chance. That's all I wanted. A year after Robert's death, I received a letter. Real mail with a stamp and a handwritten address. From Brandon. Inside was a short note and a photograph. The photograph showed Brandon standing outside New Horizons Treatment Center with a certificate. 1 year sober from gambling. He looked different, thinner, older, but somehow more solid, more real. The note said, Emily, I completed my 1-year outpatient program last week. I'm continuing therapy, but I wanted you to know I made it this far. Tyler told me about repaying all his victims. I'm proud of him. Dad would be too. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about Dad leaving us a choice. I'm still angry that he felt he had to trap us to teach us a lesson, but I'm also starting to understand why he did it. We didn't leave him many options. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that your mercy wasn't wasted. I'm not the same person who tried to steal from you last summer. I'm trying to be someone Dad could actually be proud of. Maybe someday, if you're willing, we could talk. Just talk. No lawyers, no documents, no ultimatums. Just two people who both love the same man and are trying to honor his memory. No pressure. I understand if you're not ready, or if you'll never be ready. Thank you for giving me the chance to become someone better. Brandon, I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in the wooden box Brandon had made the one on my mantel. I wasn't ready to talk yet. Maybe not for a long time. But I kept the letter, kept the photograph, kept the possibility open. Because that's what Robert had taught me in the end. Not about revenge or justice or even forgiveness, but about hope, about believing that people could change even when every piece of evidence suggested they couldn't, about giving people the chance to prove you right. I'm writing this on the porch of my cottage in Carmel, watching the sunset paint the ocean gold and pink and purple. 18 months since Robert died. 18 months since I discovered his son's betrayal and his elaborate plan to protect me. People ask me sometimes if I regret showing mercy, if I wish I'd sent Brandon and Tyler to prison. The honest answer, I don't know. Some days I think about what they tried to do to me, how they planned to leave me homeless and broke, how they stole from their dying father without remorse. On those days, mercy feels like weakness, but other days I get a progress report showing Brandon still clean, Tyler still working 2 jobs to build an honest life. On those days, mercy feels like the hardest, bravest thing I've ever done. Robert left me a choice, not just about what to do with his estate, but about what kind of person I wanted to be. Someone who chose vengeance, or someone who chose hope. I chose hope, and I'm still choosing it every single day. It's not always easy. Some days it hurts, but it's honest. And I hope it's what Robert wanted all along. Not justice, not revenge, just the possibility of redemption. For his sons, and for me.